we already have to paint the gray walls. The gray LVPs are all coming up, right? The cabinets that we were buying in 2019, they suck. People want some colors besides white, right? Like the subway, the little subway tiles are no longer that cool.
Right.
Like we have to redo these things every 5 to 7 years.
So one thing that, at least in the 15 years of being adjacent to real estate, or whether I was in real estate, it doesn't matter, is we always talk about time value money, but we're always referring it to more of like a social aspect of like, if I'm doing this and I'm not doing that, how can I make money over here and make money over there? But like, and I don't always want to go back to SMU MBA program.
You should.
But like, you know, I'm going back to school this fall for SMU Executive MBA program. But literally the workshop I was in yesterday and I'm going to right after this, they put a formula aspect to a time value money. And I never knew, I'm sure I knew when I was in college about this formula, but like, because I always associated time value money as more of that social aspect of, you know, almost like in the equivalent opportunity cost.
Yeah.
If I'm over here, I can't be there. But literally, like there's formulas of present value, future value, and all the, and you're just like, oh, good man. No wonder these executives in these big buildings make all the
regular
money.
real estate investors never look at it that way.
That's my point.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the amount of properties that I've bought by saying, hey, this thing appreciated by X amount. I can take 100 or 200 grand. I can move that into $1 million worth of property. 1031 exchange, by the way. Or maybe I buy 5 properties on a 1031 exchange, which means I don't pay any taxes on the gain. Only when I go to exit out those other 5 properties, unless I 1031 again until I die, then eventually you're going to pay. But
your kids are.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try not to make them pay. But my point being is now you're just starting that cycle all over again. I think the thing that real estate investors miss out on too is when you own a property for too long, that's a huge mistake. Because if you own it for more than 5 or 7 years, I mean, look what we're doing right now. We already have to paint the gray walls. The gray LVPs are all coming up, right? The cabinets that we were buying in 2019, they suck. People want some colors besides white, right? Like the subway, the little subway tiles are no longer that cool.
Right.
Like we have to redo these things every 5 to 7 years. So you need to exit at the right time, so that way you don't have to go in and redo all these things too.
One thing I'd also, that house, are y'all short-term renting it or is it just empty?
It's empty.
So one thing
we stay there when the power goes out or when she's mad at me.
But I mean, we all know that like a house, if it's vacant, it dies. Like houses have their own livelihood. So it needs people, like the energy of people to be in there to keep it alive. Because like, look at most vacant houses. When they're vacant and they just sit stagnant, they fall apart. And it's like, it's hard to explain. It's like, why would it fall apart? It's just right there. But they do. So that's another thing that y'all have to consider is like, that's great that we own this asset and it keeps appreciating. But the longer it stays vacant, the more it's just going to fall apart.
I want to talk about the human element of this thing too.
Please.
So if I ever run for political office, please like put this on camera. But
Look at right there.
So one of the things that we do is every 30 days, we're looking 60 days out to see who's going to renew. And we rate our tenants in a green, yellow, and red based on their payment history. And also based on like when we go, like for instance, when maintenance goes in the house on our next team meeting, we say, hey, how clean they keep the house? They're like, they're dirty, they're red. Or, hey, you know, they're okay. It's just a little messy. There's some crayon on the wall, but it's paint and carpet. We'll be fine. Rate them a yellow. If it's super clean, they're a green. Man, we want to treat that tenant like gold, right? Because they've treated us the same way. So even though I'm looking at these things in a cell and on a spreadsheet, I'm looking at how these tenants are treating us as well. If they're treating us well, I want to do the same thing for them. Like I want to make sure, hey, we can work with this tenant to keep them in the house because they're going to be there forever. Instead of them being there 4.5 years, maybe they're there for 7 years, and then I don't have to do all the work once they leave anyway.
Well, also, if you have 257 doors in one market and they get a job on the other side of town, if they're a good tenant and you have an opening, you can just swap them over.
We swap them over, man. And if all we have to do is go in there and paint, maybe change a little bit of flooring out or whatever, and we're spending a grand, $2,000, great. Like we've gotten the life out of that tenant, right? Like I want to keep people in there that are keeping the houses up.